Hello friends, my name is Mariana and today I'll be reviewing the next batch of books that I read. Book number 19 was The Department of Speculation by Jenny Offill. This is a story about a marriage told in short fragments, almost like memories, as if someone, referred to only as the wife throughout the book, is looking back on their own life. This is one of those cases that I can acknowledge that this was a quality book, well written, but also say that there were pieces that didn't quite connect for me and that didn't quite work. In general, this was well written and very emotional. It painted this whole picture for you in these smaller memories and moments. Sometimes these moments were incredibly effective in communicating a string of events and showing you pieces that you really felt led up to the whole of these people's lives and their relationship. Other times the pieces to me felt out of place. I think there must have been something purposeful in the way that the story about falling apart seems so fragile. In practice, however, it wasn't a very enjoyable experience for me as a reader. It starts to almost fall apart at the seams if you don't pay close enough attention or if you walk away from the story for any amount of time. Finally, I'll say that I'm all for an unresolved ending, and I think one was fitting here because there is no clean-cut ending to something as big as a marriage, but this was a little bit too abrupt again for my enjoyment as a reader. Overall, this really left me battling between recognizing the skill and the beauty here and just not having it connect or really all come together in a way that I thought was an enjoyable reading experience, so I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Book number 20 was Things We Lost in the Fire by Mariana and Enriquez. This is a book that I've mentioned a few times already in videos and on Twitter because I enjoyed it, especially as a work that left me with a lot of feelings. This is a collection of short stories that I can best describe as social commentary wrapped up in gothic horror. As with all short story collections that I've encountered, there were highs and lows for me within this collection. I'll start with the low. There were 2 to 3 stories in which Enriquez was using elements of the supernatural, hauntings and such right along disabilities, and it made me uncomfortable the way that she did it, especially because these were short stories and she didn't have the space to fully explore the comparisons that she was trying to make. There were a lot of times that I left one of her stories feeling like it was too short or too little developed. At the end of the book, all said and done though, I ended up kind of liking that feeling. I think Enriquez does a really good job of building her story and dropping us off at the right point to let our imaginations do the rest. That's definitely a quality that I can foresee really frustrating other readers, but it ended up working for me because of the way that she just ends up leaving you kind of stranded in the darkness of each and every one of her stories. Each story in the collection is very much carried by the creepy elements. We don't learn so much about her characters or her setting outrightly, but to me, by the end, I really saw the way that those creepy elements were stand-ins for social commentary and kind of representing the evil that man is capable of. In that way, we are then getting to know both her characters and her setting. This is not something that I think would have mass appeal, but I would recommend checking it out for anybody who's intrigued by creepy stories set in Buenos Aires. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Book number 21 was Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, a collection of poetry that I loved so much. I feel like I've heard overwhelmingly positive things about this collection, though the opposite end of that is that people on my Goodreads and my timeline and such that don't like this really don't like it. The main complaints that I tended to see were about Kaur's use of line breaks and the unpoetry-like quality to her poetry. It's true that this is a collection of more contemporary poetry, so to enjoy it you have to have a less narrow view of what poetry is. It isn't very flowery or lyrical, but it is absolutely brilliant in the way that Kaur captures these super complicated and big emotions and moments with economy. Also, line breaks are really important in poetry, people. They create internal rhythm and they can be visual, and sometimes I wonder why I read Goodreads reviews. I loved reading about the author's decision to only write in lowercase and using periods, trying to capture a language that she couldn't quite express herself in. That feeling of having a language so close to your life and yet so far from mastery is one that I know. So to have her capture that experience and create a whole collection using that style was really meaningful to me. It also contributed to the fluid way that the collection read. Milk and Honey is an apt title for more than one reason, but I loved the way that it kind of describes the ebb and flow of the collection itself. Short poems flow into one another, and sometimes that rhythm is stopped by a thicker, longer poem. While I love the simplicity and more than once was choked up by the themes, my one critique would be that I felt it could have been tightened in places to stop some of those shorter poems from feeling repetitive. Overall though, this was impactful in its simplicity and its beauty. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Book number 22 was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. This was obviously a reread. It was my intention to reread all of the Harry Potter books before I went to Harry Potter World as part of Booknet Fest. That did not happen. Anyways, the point is that this was my first time reading from the illustrated version, and obviously this is absolutely gorgeous. There's not much to say here other than this is a favorite book and this is a stunning addition. Book number 23 was Romancing the Duke by Tessa. I think it was earlier this year or last year that I set a goal to read from 2 genres that I wasn't accustomed to reading from. One was romance and the other was manga. People immediately directed me to Tessa for the romance portion of that. I believe I read one other Tessa before this and I had a lot of mixed feelings, so I picked up this one and I had a lot of mixed feelings. This is super difficult for me because I'm having an experience that I don't have very often, at least when it comes to books, and that is that I'm having a hard time considering this critically. And honestly, I couldn't even tell you at this point what the story was about or what I encountered here or what I felt about it. I think just to tell you that I love ratings and I defend them to the death, especially because they are able to communicate some initial information very quickly, but I just cannot rate a Tessa book. I will say that I read this in a single sitting because I didn't want to put it down, but then I left the story feeling unsatisfied. And then I forgot the story entirely shortly thereafter. Because I read them so quickly, however, I am having a hard time really thinking about or pinpointing what exactly misses for me. I don't know. I'm really struggling here. I cannot rate or review this yet. Maybe one day I'll be able to. I'll probably pick up another Tessa book and try that. I don't know. Book number 24 was Time of Contempt by Andrezj Sapkowski. In case you've been following my progress through this series, which is the source material for the Witcher video games, hooray, I made it through book 4. I read books 1 through 3 last year, and this year I reread books 1 through 3, and then finally I read book 4, and it was definitely my least favorite in the series to date. I feel like everything that I loved about the premise and the setup of the world is now getting further and further away from the direction that the book is heading. We start with Geralt, who is quickly becoming one of my favorite characters, and he is this morally ambiguous witcher who goes around fighting monsters, and that is now giving way to the story that is kind of blooming right now, which is a multiple country kind of war and strategy and political intrigue. That's not inherently a bad thing, but it's not really what I signed up for, and this book especially was super light on Geralt himself. Shifts in point of view weren't my favorite. They all felt a little bit sloppy, and it ended kind of abruptly. I couldn't tell you why we ended the story where we did. The first half of the book was all people sitting around and talking about war, and then the second half happened so quickly that it was almost difficult to keep track of all of the action. The lack of balance in the story and the overall feeling like there was a lack of intention made it really difficult to get through, and by the end, where we just had this tacked on story of Ciri and it involved some element of sexual assault, I was completely over it, and I ended up giving this 2 out of 5 stars. That's it for me today. As always, please let me know down in the comments if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned or if you're interested in reading them. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon. I have never reread the entire series from beginning to end since I first reread it. I usually get up to a Goblet of Fire and things start getting dark and I like nope my way out of it.